Hello, and welcome to I'm a Fan of That, a podcast about all things fandom, told through objects, stories, and studies, with a bit of silliness thrown in along the way. Your hosts on this journey are Dr. Vivian Asimos, public anthropologist and pop culture academic, and me, pop culture writer and journalist, all-round enthusiast, Holly Swinyard. Join us as we deep dive into the wonderful and wacky world of fan culture, its history, the people who make it up, and the way we look at this ever-growing part of our society. Fair warning, we may well talk about some adult themes, use some adult language, and possibly get a bit nerdy about the whole thing. You have been warned.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another wonderful episode of I'm a Fan of That, the exploration.
I'm a fan of that!
That's our new theme song. This is the deep dive into different fandoms and explorations of fandoms through objects that we love, which is a section that we have sometimes drifted away from a little bit, but today we actually have an item.
A real thing!
And in fact, I am wearing it right now.
If you're watching the live recorded stream.
So I have with me some lovely Totoro earrings. Yay!
Oh, they're so cute.
These are probably, I always really like, because I don't wear very many like nerdy t-shirts or anything. But I do have lots of nerdy earrings. I think my favorite is I have the symbol of the Inquisition from Dragon Age Inquisition as earrings. Cool. And I think I've only ever had one person ever recognize it. Because they just look really cool. They look like a cool design earring. Yeah. And so I always like that kind of stuff.
To be fair, when you said the Inquisition, my brain instantly went to, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. And I wanted to know how you had Monty Python Inquisition earrings.
Oh, I thought you just meant like the historic Spanish Inquisition.
No, like the Monty Python sketch. I would be even more concerned if you had like actual Spanish Inquisition
Oh my god.
I'd be like, Vivian, do you need to tell me something about...
I've been wanting to get Slenderman ones, but I know exactly what I want them to look like, and they don't exist. Which is that I want the head to be like the stud that goes through, and then have the body like dangle.
Oh, that would be... You make so much money.
I know. I should learn how to make them because I
But you could like 3D print them, wear them. Like resin print them.
Probably. I mean, let me just whip out my 3D printer, Holly.
I mean, you say that. I do have one downstairs.
All right, I'll just go over to yours.
But of course I do. Yeah, we'll set it up in the shed, because it's really loud and fumey, because it's a resin printer. Anyway, this is not what we're meant to be talking about.
No, we're talking about Ghibli today.
Woo!
We just decided, we're gonna do this because I've got as my video essay channel for people who really like Ghibli, go over there because I feel like I'm constantly dipping more and more into Ghibli, and I've got a list. I was going through my list of video essays for the rest of this year, and 3 or 4 of them were Ghibli, and I was like, I gotta spread this out. They can't all be at the end of this year.
You can have it all in this episode, and then people know what they're looking at. Because I think everybody kind of, if you're nerdy, tangentially nerdy, you probably know Studio Ghibli. I would assume most people have heard of Ghibli. Yeah. Oh, please, people listening to this podcast, I really do hope. But I think a lot of us kind of maybe have a shallow view. Like, that sounds really bad because the films are stunning and beautiful and all this sort of stuff. And as I said before we started recording, if you have any media literacy, you will kind of understand this man's message, which is war is bad, look after the planet.
Yep.
That's his message. War bad, planet good. Be nice to each other. But I think there's more to it than that. That's quite a shallow reading. And I'm really excited because I know you've done video essays on this before. And when you were like, I have loads to do, I was like, well, this is going to be the Ollie learning day.
Yes.
I'm going to sit here and I'm going to go, please teach me.
We'll see how much I get through because I think there's some of the themes like we were talking about. I've got one particular theme I want to do and I could probably fit like 5 different Ghibli films into that idea. And I was just trying to figure out which one to do. But then there's some films that it's like, I got to rewatch it so I can pick out like one thing to talk about because obviously we can talk about so much in each one. And I'm trying to spread them out because I could probably talk about my favorites for ages and ages and ages. But I'm a big Ghibli person. We grew up watching them, so I think like most people, that was kind of how I was introduced to it. But there was like we watched like 2 or 3 of them constantly, and then I wasn't introduced to like a load of the other ones until way later. I don't know why. I guess it was just what my mother was aware of.
Yeah.
So
I think most people have seen Spirited Away.
Yeah.
I would guess that's the one most people have seen. I would imagine Howl's Moving Castle and Princess Mononoke are the other 2 that most people are aware of and have seen.
I hadn't seen Howl's Moving Castle or Princess Mononoke until I was a bit older. We grew up watching Totoro and Kiki's Delivery Service.
Ah, okay. Yeah, no,
my mom loves Kiki's Delivery Service.
I wonder, because Howl's Moving Castle is based on a British book, so I wonder whether maybe that meant it's been shown on TV here more.
Maybe. I mean, I think it's just... Jones. Yeah, because I don't know how much those were available on TV in general. Like, we used to watch Totoro through a VHS. It wasn't like it was just on for us. Same thing with Kiki. We had it, like, on a thing that my mom would put on. It wasn't like, oh, Kiki's on today. Like...
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying I think it might be just dependent on what my mother was aware of and knew about, and she knew those 2 and really liked them, and so that's what we watched a lot. So yeah, it wasn't until like high school that I started digging way more into it and got obsessed.
So my introduction to Ghibli was because I started enjoying anime and then went to conventions and stuff as like 14, 15-year-old. But also because H&M, if anybody remembers H&M, used to have an anime section which was full of the Studio Ghibli DVDs at the time. So I was a teenager, so it was DVDs. And I used to like save up I had a little kiddo job. I think I was doing a paper round. And so I used to save up to go and buy the DVDs so that I could buy myself them. So I actually have quite a lot of them now just from that, because they were the anime that I had access to. Like, it was either by those or like things like Akira, and I'd seen Akira with friends and I did not particularly take to it. I mean, I understand it's a masterpiece of, but for me as a teenager, it was not my vibe. Whereas Spirited Away was. So, that was what was available to me. So I watched Spirited Away was the obvious one I got first, and then Howl's Moving Castle, and actually I got The Cat Returns, which I then had to buy Whispers of the Heart to understand what the hell was going on, because they're kind of linked. And then I was like, wait, this doesn't make that much difference.
I think you probably could watch The Cat Returns without knowing and still get it. I can't remember what order I watched them in, but I don't.
And then the thing that really was weird is I am a massive Ursula Le Guin fan, which shocks nobody. And The Wizard of Earthsea Chronicles are some of my favourite books of all time. They're a big part of my childhood and growing up, and a big connection to my dad. Studio Ghibli made a Wizard of Earthsea film, and it is not good.
I was about to say, I didn't think we were gonna pretend that didn't exist.
It doesn't exist, but I just feel like I have to mention that I was disappointed by them on one occasion.
Well, to be fair, so this is a little inside scoop of Ghibli, is basically Miyazaki's son did that one, and he doesn't trust his son to take over the business, which is why he keeps coming in and out of retirement, because then his son makes something like Earthsea, and then he goes, oh no, I gotta come back.
So I also know, I found out after the fact that they couldn't get the rights to the first 2 books, because they're owned by, I want to say Sony or something like that, from like ages back in like the 80s and 90s, and they just won't relinquish them for whatever reason. That it hasn't come up that they have to yet. They keep renewing it for various projects, and it's so they couldn't get the rights to make the first book, so they picked book number 4, and it's like, you can't make the 4th book in what is a quartet. That's impossible. You can't tell that story. You tell the first one or you don't tell it, because actually the first book would be a perfect Studio Ghibli project. It fits everything about what Ghibli is. Yeah, until those rights come up, I don't think they'll touch it again.
I don't think they can touch it again.
No.
They've burned that bridge.
It's such a shame, because I really do think First Wizard of Earthsea book, which is one of, if you haven't read it, one of the most beautiful fucking books of all time. You should read it. It's amazing. It makes me cry every single time. I'm actually welling up a little bit thinking about it right now. Read them all. They're great. But yeah, we're not talking about Ursula Le Guin. We should.
Yeah, maybe a different day.
I feel like I was never like a big super fan of Ghibli. I love it, and Totoro I watched again as a older teenager, and Totoro is beautiful. I wonder if it was better to watch. I don't know. I feel like I got a different journey out of it having some understanding of what it was about, because I watched it with one of my own parents having cancer. So I do wonder whether there was something about that in there. I don't know. And then I watched Grave of Fireflies. And I will never watch it again. Once was enough, thank you.
They got some deep ones.
Yeah. But I feel like Grave of Fireflies is the most obvious of Ghibli's films of what they're talking about. It really, the others kind of, there's metaphor wrapped around it, or there's one biopic, is there? Which is about the one that's...
Oh yeah, they've got the one about the plane guy
planes.
Or something.
Yeah. Which is super interesting. Essentially, if you've ever watched Grave of Fireflies, it's a harrowing depiction of nuclear war.
Yep.
As experienced by the Japanese people. And you can kind of understand maybe why war bad is the mantra of this film company.
Well, and also...
that's pretty much my knowledge of Ghibli.
Well, and also protections in regards to nature because of, again, the effect of nuclear war can completely devastate an environment. One of the things that I have always really appreciated about it, and this was something that I talked about in one of my video essays, go check it out. But I did one where I talked about Donna Haraway's idea of the Chthuluscene, which is set in contrast to the Anthropocene, which is this idea of the geological age of humans. And it's one of those where it's one of those academic terms where like it was used to just denote like geological layering that then spread out to other, other areas that then take it and use it. So anthropology uses it a lot to just talk about the current kind of world scene, but it ends up centering everything on humans. And Donna Haraway's idea of the Chthuluscene is that we shouldn't do that.
Well, I mean, what a choice of name for it.
Yeah.
We should center everything around the giant tentacle monster.
It is not based on Cthulhu. It is based on the Greek.
Where the name comes from, right? Okay.
That's what it's supposed to. And she apparently gets really mad whenever people relate to Cthulhu. Which, to me, it's like, valid. Well, you brought it on yourself. You had to know. You had to know what you were doing.
Like, it's kind of fun.
So she spells it with the CH.
Around humans.
So, to be fair.
We should center it around the giant tentacle.
Yes, but to be fair, there's a lot of similar ideas of Chthuluscene in Lovecraft, but that's probably a discussion for a different time.
It's all right. We'll do a bonus episode on that, maybe.
But basically, I think Ghibli's a really good demonstration of this, because the way that I think some people do it is almost centering it fully on nature and being like, nature is the only thing. But Ghibli, I think, does a really good job of saying, there's a give and take here, and you kind of have to see that humans aren't inherently bad, and they do need the environment to live, and they need to consume it to live, but also you shouldn't be just consuming it indiscriminately and not thinking about what you're doing. And I think Princess Mononoke is an amazing example of this, because you've got, like, the human camp that is set against the forest, but the main character sees that, like, no, these humans are, like, they're just trying their best, and like the leader is initially depicted as this like evil chick, but then she's caring for lepers and is shown as being very devoted to her people and clearly loves them and is doing what she thinks is right for their survival. And the forest is doing the same, and he's having to kind of try to communicate between these two groups in between by going, no, like, you're not bad, but you're not bad either, and you need to find the middle ground between these two. And I think that's something that's really important and is often, I think, lost, particularly in Western ideas of, like, let's talk about nature.
Yeah, and I think as well, because it's Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind, has a very similar kind of message to it, the overuse of the environment and sort of it fighting back and then realizing where the middle ground is. I think it's very definitely a massive part of the message of understanding the environment around you. I mean, even if you've only watched Spirited Away, that's still the message of Spirited Away. It's spoilers for those who haven't seen it, but that's the way that she eventually gets rescued or frees herself, I suppose actually we should say, is because she remembers Haku and what he was, and like the way that humans have damaged the spirit world and stuff. And it's interesting. I think if you've watched the subbed version, it's clearer. than in the dub, because in the dub it's slightly glossed over what happened to him. In the sub, it's clearer that he forgot who he was because the humans kind of destroyed the river he was the spirit of.
Yeah, they drained the river. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And so he can't remember who he was and all that sort of stuff, but she's able to do that for him. And it's kind of the message of the film is that give and take. And I think it's very easy to forget that in like Spirited Away because of it's beautiful, and it is much more about the spirituality and spiritual side of it, but it's still very much the message. Yeah,
I mean, in all of it, because No Face is one of my favorite monsters. I'm gonna designate him as monster in kind of contemporary storytelling. He's one of my favorites because he's just weird. He's fun and weird, and I just love him.
He's kind of sweet.
Yeah. He is, because he doesn't know how to communicate and how to connect to other people, so he connects by giving them the things they want, and it creates this constant need to consume. So it's this idea of the overconsumption. So it's like this idea of the overconsumption, but in the need to relate to other people. So again, it's not inherently bad. It's not like this necessarily evil thing. It's a thing that just happens, which is also a very kind of Buddhist idea, although he's much more Miyazaki and Ghibli is much more focused on Shinto, which is not the same thing, as despite what a lot of people like to think. It's not the same thing as Buddhism, but with Buddhism has a lot more of the things aren't good or bad, it just kind of is. That's just the way the world is, and you have to learn how to navigate around that. And No Face isn't inherently evil. He's not bad. He just wants to communicate, and one of the reasons why he becomes obsessed with the hero, Chihiro, is that she doesn't want from him. So he learns that giving people gold makes them really happy and makes them give him more food and allows him to consume more and all this kind of stuff. And he thinks that's connection, but it's not connection. It's connection based on him giving them money. And then he tries to give Chihiro the money, and she's like, no, thanks. I'm going to go over here. And he doesn't know what to do with it. And I just love that.
Doesn't he give her bath tokens at some point, like quite early on in the film? And she needs
because
those,
she needs one. Yeah. So he gives her one, and then he realized that made her happy. So he starts giving her loads, and she's like, I only needed the one. And he's confused because he's like, but you wanted this, so I'm going to give you more of this. And she's like, no, thanks. I just needed one.
Yeah.
So, and
it's really interesting. Yeah. I think, and it's interesting because he isn't ever depicted as bad. He is almost conditioned into a behavior that does destroy things because of other people's desire for the gold and things like that. It's quite interesting in that way that he becomes monstrous, because I would never say he, like, in his kind of form that you see him in and then he is at the end, he's not monstrous.
No,
but he is when other people are like, oh yeah, you give us thing, yeah, you get that. And then he's one of the things I really like about Spirited Away, and I like about Ghibli in general, is that people aren't ever really depicted as villains. People are allowed compassion and change and to be regretful and remorseful for their actions, and even allowed forgiveness in many situations, despite the fact they may have been awful, which I find is a very refreshing take on stuff, considering that a lot of the time in Western movies and storytelling, the bad guy gets killed. You don't get to redeem yourself. You die. You don't even get to go to prison. A lot of the time you're shot in the head, by the good guy, or thrown off a cliff, or something. They'll be like, I'm going to save you. And then an accident happens where they actually, they perish in some capacity. People aren't, the ending is the bad guy is no longer there to be dealt with. And that's the punishment. And it's kind of, it feels like that's very much the only punishment that's allowed in a lot of Western storytelling. Whereas I feel like in Ghibli, there is much more consideration for people's actions and the world that made them that way.
Yeah, there's healing, and I think that's another reason why I really like No Face, is because he ends up going with Chihiro to basically the villain's sister, who just lives by herself in a swamp and does baking and knits and spins wool, and No Face ends up finding kind of a home there, and he decides to stay with her. And I think there's this really quiet moment where they're all sat around a table and he's just very slowly eating cake, which is in such contrast to where he was in the bathhouse, where he was just gobbling giant banquets of food. And I just love that there's this quiet healing moment where he's able to then just live this very healed life after realizing that that's how he connects to people, is through spinning yarn and having this woman go, "Oh, you spin really well," and he's like, "Oh, yay."
It's really sweet.
It's so cute.
And I mean, because the characters, I want to say Baba Yaga, that's not her name.
No, it's like Zinbaba, I think.
Zimbabwe, yeah. And her sister, Granny, are really interesting characters because while she is very much the antagonist, she's not evil.
So Zenny Baba is the sister that lives in the swamp, and Yubaba is the
Yubaba,
villain.
Yeah. So Yubaba is, I don't think she does not feel like she's bad. She is just antagonistic to the storyline as it is. She has her way of doing things and all that kind of stuff. It's almost like fairy lore, right? That you don't understand the fairies. They have their own way, their own morals, and spirits in Japanese mythology kind of, as far as my understanding, I am not a scholar of Japanese mythology, seem to have a similar thing of they have their own way of doing things, their own morality that is not the same as humans. And so to put that morality onto them is in the same way that No-Face isn't a monster, he's just trying to learn how to be, and he could be a monster to some people, but not to others. But then obviously there are spirits and parts of any mythology that are evil, are bad, are antagonistic, but I'm not sure if I would ever count Yubaba as actively evil. I think she's looking after her own space.
Yeah.
And she has maybe a not great way of doing that. But it's interesting because
she's a boss bitch.
Yeah. I don't know. I just don't see her as like evil in the same way as often villains in, again, Western media are portrayed as like really bad. They're doing, she does, it's not the same thing.
There's very few individuals in Ghibli that are depicted as villain bad, like, just evil for the sake of evil. Because like I said, even in Mononoke, you've got these two opposite forces, and neither of them, even though they're like killing people, neither of them are depicted as inherently evil. They're just both trying to survive and doing what they think they need to do in order to do that. It's one of the things that I think my mom really liked about Kiki's delivery service is that there's not a villain. There's no, like, the whole thing, and this is kind of the case for most of Ghibli's films in general, is that most of the outside force is just kind of there to explain the dilemmas going on more inherently inside of different people rather than because of some evil person. It's you dealing with your own doubt. It's you figuring out how to navigate through the world. It's you figuring out how to, in the case of Princess Mononoke, to see with eyes unclouded by hate. It's all of those things of like learning how to actually just exist in the world in the best way possible without harming other people and the environment around you, and how difficult that is.
So the one I think a lot of people talk about well is Ponyo, because Ponyo is about a parent having to learn to let go of their child, really, on both sides. It's about learning that your children are not necessarily exactly what you want them to be. I mean, a lot of people kind of think of Ponyo as sort of a retelling of The Little Mermaid. I don't really... I mean, a bit, yeah, but it's not. Sort of the antagonistic force in Ponyo is sort of her father, but not really. It's more the ocean at large and nature doing things and learning how to be a person. That's what that movie is about. It's about, your parents might have an idea of what you're going to be, but you've got to learn on your own. Showing that in different ways. There are various different parental figures throughout that movie and various different ways the two children characters interact with them. And I always find it very interesting that there are people who might consider her father as an antagonist, and he's really not. He's just dadding badly, And I think this is the thing, it's like lots of people look for antagonists. I remember very distinctly when Encanto came out, and people really, really wanted the grandmother to be the antagonist and really wanted her to be bad and all this sort of stuff because, fair enough, they've had bad experiences with members of their own family who may have had those traits. But again, that movie is just trying to explore that idea of relationships and family and parents and how we interact with each other and the trauma we can pass on to each other. And it's a very similar thing of like, there is no villain here. The villain is bad family structures. And maybe we should communicate more with each other.
Yeah, a lot of it is also the difference in just the way that stories are told in the West first.
Yes.
I was going to say the East, but I should be a lot more specific than that.
Japan.
Yeah. Than Japan.
Because I also think we need to be very cautious about what we mean by the West, because I don't think we necessarily even mean all of Europe, because lots of European storytelling traditions are very different. Can I talk about the Moomins now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, cool, because the Moomins and Studio Ghibli, I kind of am like, yeah, these two things are the same. Like, the Moomins, I don't think at any particular point has an antagonist. That is an antagonist who is anything other than just kind of dealing with their own stuff. Like, you have the Groke, who is essentially a representation of the ever-moving force of depression and, like, having to hide from things in the world and all this sort of stuff. Like, and every character represents something and the way that Tove Jansson feels about things. But none of them are evil, per se. I don't even think the Groke is evil. I think the Groke just is. And it's very interesting when you kind of compare that to things like Studio Ghibli, where, again, it's just the world is, and you're learning to live in it, and you have to make the best of it, and all that kind of stuff. And you have a lot of those similarities, I think, between those two types of storytelling. There isn't a bad guy. There's problems. There's things that go wrong, or, like, the world is difficult, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. My particular favourite Moomin story is when Moomin wakes up in the dead of winter and nobody else is awake, and how he's really struggling to deal with that, and what it's like being alone. And he's all alone in this world, and he feels really, like, like isolated because it's snow as well, so it's quiet and silent and all this sort of stuff, and everyone else is hibernating. And then he eventually comes across Chthuluscene, who kind of explains to him, this is just how the world is sometimes. And I love Chthuluscene. Chthuluscene's a wonderful character, and was based on Tove Jansson's real life partner, who I guess they couldn't get married, but her lesbian life partner,
her best friend and roommate.
Her best... Yeah, no. Everybody... What? No. Tove Jansson was not that person. But, and so I always really love the method of talking about what it feels like to be alone in the world, particularly as a queer person, which is obviously what this kind of story is sort of talking about, given Chthuluscene's relationship to her real-life partner. And that way of being like, it wasn't particularly portrayed as the world is evil and against you. It was portrayed as you feel apart from it. Even, like, it's sad, but it's not angry. And I find that a very different method of storytelling. I don't necessarily know if I agree with it. I think, the world is violent towards queer people. But, like, I find it very interesting that was her way of talking about it. Because actually, isolation is violence in the same way, so... But you still find people, you still find connection. You're not alone. And you will find people who will take your hand and lead you through it. It's a very beautiful way of storytelling. And I see the similarities between those stories and those kind of... I don't know whether it's Tove Jansson or whether it's Finnish storytelling. It could be a mix of both. That is similar to Ghibli in that way. That there is a very different way of looking at these things and understanding them differently.
I mean, some of the differences in regards to Japanese storytelling is also just inherent in the way they plot. So the actual structure is different. So a lot of, say, British and American stories are typically 3 acts. Even when you go back into kind of more older, like folkloric kind of stories, they follow a very similar 3-act structure. But with Japanese, they tend to, like most of the storytelling is a 4-act structure. So Kishotenketsu is the kind of word for that plot structure, which has nothing to do with conflict. So, which is, again, kind of going to this idea that there isn't like an outside antagonistic force that is forcing you to, I don't know, do something that you don't like because they're evil. It's because the structure isn't reliant on conflict. So It's the idea that you start out with the plot. Basically, Act 1 is kind of setting up the introduction and kind of bringing everything, kind of this is who everybody is. Then it goes into development as Act 2, so you start kind of learning more, developing more, seeing how everything is working. And then you have what is called the twist, which is not a twist in regards to like the way that we think of a twist is like he was dead the whole time. Like it doesn't have to be that dramatic. The twist can just be something as simple as a new revelation on the kind of person that you are. It can just be I now see the world a different way, or there's new light on something that like that is all still twist in regards to this. And then the last one is the conclusion. And so as you see, like when you see like an act, like a 3-act structure in like, say, American storytelling, a lot of it is about conflict and the climax being like the ultimate big fight. And like that's typically how everything is described. But none of this is described in Kishotenketsu as conflict. It doesn't rely on that in order to tell a story. And it's why I think Japanese storytelling also has a lot more slice of life stories. And like Kiki is something like this, where it's just a bit of a person's life and how they learn about the world. Because we all have these twist moments of like, oh shit, that person wasn't bad. They just thought I meant something different. And it was all miscommunication. And now I get it. And it means that you then navigate things differently in the future. It's like it's that's just what life is.
Well, I wonder as well whether, because there is a Moomins anime, it's a classic, everyone should watch it, from the 90s, and I wonder, and they're very, very popular in Japan. I wonder if that's why, because they are very similar kind of storytelling.
I could see that,
like that thing. And there isn't conflict in the same way. Things happen, stuff changes, people move on, lives change, all that kind of stuff. The grok exists. Every so often there is something that might be dramatic, but it wouldn't necessarily call it conflict. The one I think of the most dramatically is, I forgot what it's called, there's like the little weird worm things that are like everywhere, and they're on an island, and they're sort of chasing everybody, and everyone's quite scared of them. And then it turns out what they actually want is they all feed on lightning. And they're in the middle of the storm, and the reason that Moomin and his friends have got to this island and stopped there is because they were on a boat and the storm was coming, and so they stopped there for protection. Except the mast of the boat is attracting the lightning, and so they're all trying to. So actually, these things aren't bad. It's just the thing they want is what Moomin and his friends have, and so they're trying. Like they're sort of. They're kind of in conflict with each other, but not really. It's more just that miscommunication of like, we were scared of you because we didn't know what you were. And then actually what you want is this. Someone will probably tell me I've misremembered that story, but that's what I read it as a child and how I've kind of interpreted it. But like, that is the most sort of conflict you ever have. There is always the very famous line of Snufkin going, Moomin Valley has no crime. Let's go make some crime, to make like stuff so that they can do, like they can. It's actually in order to like try and make things better, because they keep thinking that stuff is boring. It's quite entertaining. But that's Snufkin as a character. He's gonna come in and be like, I'm causing problems on purpose. But even Snufkin, like, he's not bad. He has his own way of doing things, and they're slightly odd.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting. There aren't bad characters in it. And that's why I find them very comparable. I do wonder if they are. That's why they're quite so popular. Also, they are adorable. Adorable little creatures. Which, as we know, we love a mascot kind of character in Japan. I can see them fitting in. Yeah. But I wonder if that's it. And like, the same as, I mean, for anybody who knows what my username is on everything, is the Little Prince, or Littlest Prince, off the book. And again, a very popular story in Japan. It's made its way there, and it's incredibly popular there. Again, a story that doesn't really have an antagonist or any, and again, and it's an anti-war story as well. I've always been surprised that Studio Ghibli didn't pick that one up.
Might have to do
maybe
with rights,
they kind of feel like it does. But yeah, I feel like there are these stories out there that kind of show that the 3-act structure that we're very used to is not the only one for stories.
No.
But the way you described that 4-act structure, I could suddenly see all of these other stories that matched it, and I'm like, oh
yeah, it's
so
like
this,
99% of the stories from Japan fit that structure. That's just how it is. And so pretty much most Ghibli does. I would be interested in mapping the plot of Howl's Moving Castle from the book to mapping the structure from Ghibli, and see how like the plot is different. See if, because to be honest, I haven't really studied the plot of Howl's Moving Castle like, a lit grad. You know what I mean? But I would be interested to see how different it is just from a structural plotting level of it.
So off my head, incredibly different.
Yeah.
just incredibly different. Howl's Moving Castle, the film, I have seen described as how Howl would tell the story, whereas Howl's Moving Castle, the book, is how Sophie tells the story. And that, I think, is very accurate.
Fair. Although I do have to say, I think Ghibli is probably one of the best examples of female lead in contemporary storytelling that is just, it's...
No, and that is a lot down to Miyazaki. He's fervently about, like, he's like, female leads are important and they should be well written. Like, he has so much to say about it. Everybody look at what Miyazaki talks about women in plot, because he is, he's on the money every single time with it. He's
and
really,
they're so
really on
good.
it. They're so good. And he knows how to write women because he just writes people.
Yeah.
With an understanding that women's experience is different. Like, I don't think there's a single female character in there that I feel like, oh, that's just a man with boobs. No, they feel like women.
Yeah.
With the understanding that women are people with a life experience that is different to men. And that's correct! I've been watching a very interesting, this is a complete tangent, but I've been watching a really interesting series of video essays about men writing women, and how a lot of men essentially just remove all characteristics of everybody and write them all the same. And so you end up with none of the characters feel like men and none of them feel like women. They just all feel like this one, all kind of the same. But that inherently makes them all feel like men because that's the default in a lot of people's minds. And I found that really interesting, that they didn't necessarily write women who felt like women because they were trying to just write generic human rather than understanding that women have a different life experience in the same way that you can't just write disabled people the same as able-bodied people. They have a different life experience, and that I found quite, considering it's half the damn population of the planet.
I think there's a book that I read recently, which is the Gone World, I think is what it was called. Anyway, the main character is female, and I thought it was pretty okay for most of it, except for one flaw, and this is a trigger warning for discussion about sexual assault, so if you need to skip forward, go ahead. But basically, so in the book, the villain, it was described multiple times as how he has sexually assaulted and raped women. Like, it was known. It wasn't like hidden. It was openly discussed. And so then when she is around the main character, like the main villain, and feeling like that fear, it was all about her dying. Like, she was scared that he was going to kill her. And the whole time I was going, that's not what I would be scared of.
No.
That is not what I would be scared of at all. I would rather that. I would rather that than the alternative. And the fact that that wasn't involved at all was to me, it was one of the worst depictions of writing women, just even with boob jiggly things, like, because at least that's fun. But like, this was like, no, you just don't understand. You don't understand what this threat feels like if that's what your main character is scared of. Because I know if I was in that situation, I'd be like, please shoot me in the head. I would prefer that, actually.
It just goes to show that men don't understand what that is at all. Because they're scared of dying.
Yeah. Again, I keep talking about Kiki because I love Kiki. But Kiki is like a story about girlhood. Specifically, not just childhood, not about growing up, not about becoming a woman. It's about girlhood. And that's such a specific experience. And he captures it so well without ever making it very overt. Like, we're talking about girl power. Like, it just lives because that's who she is. And it's,
I'm actually trying to think off the top of my head if I can think of any Studio Ghibli film that doesn't have a female protagonist. There are a few. But there are ones that are, like Howl's Moving Castle. Howl is not the protagonist.
No.
Sophie
I would say Princess Mononoke is probably the closest.
Boy and the Heron.
Yeah.
It's a boy and a heron. Yeah. That doesn't. But mostly they tend to have a female protagonist, even if it's a joint lead. So, like, Whisper of the Heart and Nausicaa have two, and Princess Mononoke And they are kind of a male and a female lead.
Yeah, so
but it
with with
on
Princess
the women.
Mononoke, it's interesting because there's 3 leads, and it's the 2 women kind of... It sounds bad to say 2 women against each other, but it kind of is. And him in between, but not in a traditional sense of that.
I think it's really interesting that clearly Miyazaki has a lot to say. And people should go and look up Miyazaki's interviews because I find them fascinating because the man is so grumpy. He's so tired. And so just like, I'm saying this. There's that wonderful meme where it's like Miyazaki is a person and it's like this really grumpy, tired man, Miyazaki's films, and then showing the Studio Ghibli films. And then you have Junji Ito, who is the creator of some of the most horrific horror manga I have ever come across. Incredibly famously awful. This is my whole guy.
Yeah. Which sounds terrible out of context.
Oh, it does. It's horrible in context. It's even worse in context. And Spiral and
I was about to say, I think
Tommy
the Spiral one is the one that gets me more than the holes.
Yeah. But he is the most happy human being I've ever... you just watch him talk and you're like, wow, you're so happy. Is it because you get it all out on the page?
Probably.
It's all of the... you get it out and so you're just light and sunshine. I love that. I think it's so funny, the sort of the dichotomy between these 2 people. But go and watch or read interviews with Miyazaki because he is fascinating. I also recommend, if you ever have the chance to see Helen McCarthy's talk on Studio Ghibli, is astonishing. I saw it at Worldcon last year and it's so good because she is a Studio Ghibli scholar. That's literally what she does all the time. And she knows everything. Or go and watch Vivian's videos because they're also amazing. I'm just going to put loads of them out.
I've done one all on No Face, and I've done one on Princess Mononoke and Lord of the Rings in relation to the Chthuluscene. And I've got to be doing another one soon. We'll see. I've got a couple on my list.
I feel like I've learnt lots today. Not just about Ghibli and Miyazaki, but also about Japanese storytelling and the way we tell stories. I think it's very important to look at how people tell stories in different places. And it's why representation matters, guys. It's really important that we have access to Studio Ghibli and them being so popular in America and the UK and the West in general, because it's nice to be able to see how other people do storytelling and it's very accessible, I guess. But that wasn't really their intention. But it's nice that it's happened. And I hope that we are able to see that happen in other places as well. I mean, I'm sure we are seeing it happening. There are some amazing... there's an animation studio in Pakistan that's just released their first film, which is stunning, really beautiful. And again, it's been lauded as sort of Studio Ghibli for Pakistan, which I don't think we should make that... It's no, it's a wonderful thing of its own. You don't need to make a comparison. But, journalists don't like doing that.
If it gets somebody to watch it, I guess that helps.
Exactly. And the more we have access to stories from around the world, the more we're going to learn about each other. And this is all leading up to me going, play Alan Wake if you want to learn about Finnish storytelling, because it's weird.
I realized that I could have done that as my object, is I have my Princess Mononoke tattoo, which is of the deer god, and then underneath it says to see with eyes unclouded by hate, because I think that's a very important way to navigate the world.
I really enjoyed this. This was lovely. This felt very refreshing.
That's good.
And I'm sorry I needed to sneeze halfway through and had a weird,
Holly, I can edit.
I know.
Now I feel like I have to leave it in order to leave in this conversation.
It's alright, we can just redo this conversation. Anyway, bye guys. We will see you. Listen to us. We're everywhere. We'll be in your eyes, your ears, various other places. No,
we will haunt your
that
dreams.
Sounds awful. We will be your waking nightmare. Especially if you're on our Patreon.
Yeah.
See what I did there? We'll be back in 2 weeks' time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening. Remember to like, review, and subscribe wherever you are listening to this podcast, and do give it a share. Tell your friends, family, fellow fans. Get the word out however you feel like you can. You can follow us on social media. Links are in the show notes, as well as some links to further reading for anyone who might be interested. Music for this episode was Nowhere Land by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. This episode was produced by Vivian Asimos and Holly Swinyard.
Since it's a new episode, should I do the introduction or do you want to do it?
I'll do it because I think I have the item this time. And I don't know how many I've done. I should probably keep that in the spreadsheet. Extend the spreadsheet! Oh, we should do a fan of that on spreadsheets. I would have such a fun time.